This is a special episode of Affinity Talks Gospel. Lizzie Harewood is joined by our guest host, Adam May, communications and ministry consultant, who is going to be talking to me, Graham Nicholls, about the Gospel Coalition and our plans for the UK.
Welcome to Affinity Talks Gospel. My name is Lizzie Harewood, and we're here today to chat with Adam May and Graham Nicholls about the meeting that happened last week about the potential of Affinity, partnership of over 1,200 churches and Christian organisations, moving to form some kind of UK version of the Gospel Coalition. So we're here to kind of reflect on that conversation, that meeting last week, and give our takes on what was discussed there. So, Adam.
So Graham, my name's Adam May, for those of you that are watching and going, who's that guy? I'm Adam that Lizzie just referred to. But Graham, just as we kind of kick off our conversation, you and I and Lizzie, we talk about the UK Gospel Coalition all the time. But actually, for those who might be watching this conversation for the very first time because they've stumbled across Affinity Talks Gospel, and also the fact that the fact that we've said that we're going to keep moving forward, people may not know what the UK Gospel Coalition is. So Graham, what is it?
Well, the idea of the Gospel Coalition UK is to connect with the basic concept of the Gospel Coalition in the UK, and hoping that in that way we can create a broader, deeper unity of gospel churches and Christian organizations. What we're not trying to do is say we are the only gospel parachurch organization or we are the only evangelicals. And we're not trying to particularly create an exclusive group, but we are trying to create something where a lot of churches that I'm in contact with and a lot of Christian leaders and Christian organizations would like to cluster around, which is that broadly confessional style of expressing our theology that the Gospel Coalition typifies, generous but actually quite well defined. And I think there's a cohort of people, a constituency of people that currently are in Affinity, but some outside Affinity, who would really appreciate that kind of a coalition. And so it's really for that. And we recognise as we're doing it that it's a finely balanced argument about the benefits and the not benefits, the things that are against it, and that we don't want to be kind of disruptive. We don't want to build an empire. We don't want to just get sort of jobs for leaders or something like that. So we recognise all those kind of challenges and that it's finely balanced. But on balance, I personally, and I think overall the feeling of the meeting was this was worth pursuing, even with all the kind of caveats of things that need to be dealt with. That was my feeling coming out of the meeting. I don't know whether that was Lizzie's as well.
Well, Graham, just before Lizzie jumps in, I'm going to ask the question.
Yeah.
Have you been surprised by the amount of people? We did an Affinity Talks Gospel podcast. I was grateful to have the invitation to come on and jump onto the podcast and co-host with Lizzie. But, have you been surprised about the number of people who've got a view on the UK Gospel Coalition?
Yeah, it is quite fascinating that people who didn't particularly have a view on Affinity, good or bad, have a view on this. So that is a little surprising. But I think when you're particularly on social media, you get people who have legitimate views that they want to express, but they're probably not representative of the whole kind of evangelical constituency. So definitely, my overwhelming sense from conversations I've had from both people who might want to be part of Gospel Coalition, but also people outside who think, well, this is not something I'd want to be involved in. Generally, there's a very positive feel about it and positive feel about the initiative, even if some of the details are still a little bit grey for them. So, yeah, I suppose in that context, I'm surprised, but there's a lot of sensitivity, very legitimate sensitivity about perhaps an aggressive form of complementarianism. There's very legitimate concerns about leaders that aren't accountable and setting up structures that are sort of self-appointed and self-regulating. So that's all very legitimate concerns. And I think that's all good stuff to talk about, but it kind of loses in all that noise. Is there a good gospel benefit to this? Could more people be equipped, encouraged, challenged, helped? feel more part of something big, and in that way spread the gospel better, know Jesus better themselves, and talk about Jesus better. And that can be a bit lost in all the kind of the procedural detail, but also, expressing people's concerns.
So, Graham, one of the questions I raised, and this was on behalf of others that I know that kind of heard of this initiative, was that what is it that the Gospel Coalition UK could do that Affinity isn't already doing, or can't just, decide to do a little bit better? Why is it that we need to have some new kind of platform or some new layer of bureaucracy to kind of deepen our unity with other evangelical believers? And I kind of brought that question to you, coming from a very neutral perspective, because I'm really open to arguments on either side. So could you maybe just articulate what it was that we discussed in that meeting, Affinity, why, sort of big picture stuff?
Yeah, I think, again, it's a very good question. And the answer is probably it might be possible to just do that, to do what was kind of called an Affinity 2.0 type of thing. It might just be possible, but I think on balance, and again, these are balanced decisions, but I think on balance, my reservations about seeking to do that, and the reason I think the Gospel Coalition is a better option, is number one, that I don't think just carrying on as we are and just hoping to kind of incrementally get a little bit better or a few more members really expresses the cultural moment. There was a real sense in the room and with people I've spoken to that this is a moment where, to some degree, with some New Frontiers churches, with Anglican churches, and with actually the people who are sort of currently inside Affinity but maybe not quite so committed, there was a real moment of we would really appreciate deeper gospel unity. And I'm just not sure we can achieve that within Affinity, because partly because of the history of how Affinity was formed, and the fact that it kind of went more along the lines of those who were independent churches and not part of established churches like the Anglican Church. There's a bit to do with history and culture. There's just a bit to do with just the practicality of how you build a team, and how you build resources and enthusiasm for something that's just harder to build by bolting onto something that already exists, and it's much easier by forming something from the bottom up. So I think there's all that area to do with the answer, and I think the second answer is you lose all the benefits of working with the Gospel Coalition. For all that there are some demerits, they're a trusted brand by many, many people. They have great convening power, which was expressed in the meeting very well by somebody. And they give us international connections, and they give us a theological emphasis, all of which drew people to these discussions. So I think those were the main two reasons. I don't know if I said anything else, Lizzie, that was convincing in the meeting about.
No, absolutely. I mean, you said a lot of stuff that was convincing, Graham. I think I just observed that quite a few people said, look, we have reservations and things that we would like to see ironed out, but actually the convening power of the Gospel Coalition is evident in the very fact that you've got so many people representative of so many different Christian organizations of all different denominations, and then the kind of parachurch organizations as well, that it does have some kind of pull. And we talked a lot about how the Gospel Coalition, the US website, is probably one of the most commonly visited websites for Christians, not just in the US, but in the UK as well. And actually, wouldn't it be great to build on that platform, that kind of vehicle, not abuse it, but perhaps then to be pointing people towards resources that were more UK centric, that were fitting and speaking into the UK culture more precisely. And it was that building from the bottom up. You just use that phrase, Graham. Some people are like, that's exciting, but that's also a little confusing. How can we do that if we're essentially borrowing something from the US that might have some kind of association? Could you explain a bit more about the safeguards that people might be wondering about how they're being put in?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think how can we do that is, in a sense, however we want. the Gospel Coalition as an organization and the people who are speaking to me don't want to impose any particular structure. They do quite reasonably want us to commit to the same ministry principles and particularly theological confessional statement. But apart from that, they're very relaxed about how it's formed. And you can see that actually in how gospel coalitions across the world have been formed, and they're structured in different ways.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I didn't realise that the Gospel Coalition, so there are so many countries that actually have their own TGC.
Yeah.
So Africa, to the Netherlands, Italy, India, France, Spain,
Australia.
all over the world.
Yeah, Australia, Canada.
Yeah, and I think I'd only ever really associated it with the US. So that was useful to find out.
Yeah, I mean, they are very relaxed about that. And so I think we need to look at, well, the general principles, but also the practical situation in the UK, which is that whatever we build needs to be transparent and accountable. And so we wouldn't actually, to be completely sort of transparent about it, we wouldn't want to build quite the same model structurally that they have for the United States. We would want some representative process where people who were part of the governing body of the Gospel Coalition UK were put forward by organizations that they were, representing networks of churches or Christian organizations, where there was a degree of accountability within those organizations. And we'd want to set up as well with our own structures, both code of conduct and adherence to particular theological statements, which would be a protection for that. So sort of from how the representation is drawn, but also to how we structure ourselves to make sure that all those safeguards are in place.
I think just my own personal perspective. So I came at this I'm quite neutral, hearing questions from different sources, including my own husband. But I went away feeling quite excited and energized that this could be a platform and a particular cultural moment that we could, or Affinity could use, or the Gospel Coalition could use. It made me more aware that there are issues that perhaps need to be ironed out, and there needs to be transparency around that. But I left the meeting feeling more excited that this could be something that God could use powerfully in a way that perhaps Affinity hadn't been able to create so far. Yeah.
And a lot of things are to do with just how organizations work. They're not always highly principled. I mean, the part of Christian power organizations can come and go. I think I might have said this on the other podcast. Churches are the engine of evangelism and discipleship. Parachurch can come and go, and some of the coming and going is pragmatic. It's to do with kind of what works in a particular moment. It's not highly principled in that it has to exist or it has to not exist. So, part of my sort of passion for this is sort of pragmatic, to do with, here's a cultural moment where this seems to be working. We should go with that. God seems to be in it. So we need to go to work in the grain of that. And I think the Gospel Coalition allows us to kind of supercharge that process. So yeah, that's why I'm very positive about it. I think it's also worth saying that one of the issues that was raised was to do with the theological statement and the fact that in some ways it's a bit narrower than the Affinity statement, but in other ways the practice is a bit broader. So there's both those things to kind of steer through. And again, to do with the council that we will form if this goes ahead, we would want men and women on that council, on that leadership team. Quite a lot of capital is sort of made in various conversations I've had about the fact that the Gospel Coalition is complementarian in its confessional statement, which some people are very comfortable with, some people are a bit kind of less comfortable with. And I want to navigate a way through that recognizes that as the confessional statement that we gather around and that the leaders commit to, but with a generous model in terms of who associates and what membership structure we have. And I think that's possible to do. And I've got some ideas about how we do that. But that is a square that we need to circle. And so we're praying about that we would get the balance right for that.
Yeah.
I was really excited, Graham, coming away, a bit like Lizzie, coming away from the meeting, thinking, "Do you know what? There was such a life in this in this room that we gathered in order to kind of try and see if we can discern under God a way forward." That's why when the statement came out saying, it was actually then in black and white to say we're beginning to move forward. But one of the things that kind of excited me was just picking up on that kind of cultural moment, and now in the fact that it's great to see Anglicans there's some challenges going on, and I wondered if you just paint a bit of a picture, Graham, just to let people see what's been coming into the inbox, the kind of conversations that you've been having, particularly with Anglican, because again, one of the things that you spoke about in the meeting was actually we need to move from a broad evangelicalism to something that's a lot clearer, and obviously it's just picking up on that cultural moment. And so for me, when you read the statement that was put out and you kind of go, it was a third who were Affinity members but 2/3 who weren't, you kind of go, that gets a little bit exciting. But particularly because of what's been coming into the inbox, what's been floating around on social media, I wondered if you just paint a bit of a picture about what's going on. Why do you think Anglicans are getting excited about the kind of gospel coalition?
I think there's a subset of Anglicans, so it's not all Anglicans, but there's a subset of Anglicans who I think through a combination of things in reality, a different probably generation of leaders who are involved, plus what's going on to do with living in love and faith, plus I think a more general feeling about wanting gospel unity and gospel partners kind of increasingly in a sort of situation where they feel sometimes within their own denomination quite isolated. So I think that's going on. But also we had a representative from the Anglican mission in England. So there's Anglicans who are not Church of England who are kind of new on the block. They've got their own distinctives. They're Anglican, they're confessional, and they're very clear on what they're doing in terms of churches. But they actually recognise we need a network where we can express gospel partnership with other churches who roughly think the same as us and who we can work more closely with. So I think it's both happening with Anglican Mission in England, but also with Anglicans more generally, being more, I suppose, receptive to kind of thoughts about this. And so, there were quite a lot of Anglicans in the meeting that people can see if they look at the photos and spot people. There was a question that happened on social media, which is worth hitting, which is, who decides who are the key evangelical leaders? And really, the simple answer to that is anyone that I spoke to who's interested. So, if anyone's listening to this who's interested in forming this kind of a coalition, that they are absolutely welcome to get involved in the discussion. So it wasn't self-selected by me; it was self-selected by people's interest. And there's obviously only a certain set of key evangelical leaders who are interested in this topic. Some are committed to other organisations which have different emphases, and that's absolutely fine. But they're not interested in this discussion because that's not kind of where they're at, which is fine.
I love the fact though that it's still, even though we've made the statement to say that we're going to continue to do further work, and I love the fact that the word there is quite deliberate and intentional, further work to be done. And actually anybody who may have now been shared this conversation because actually they're part of the networks, they're part of the churches that came to the meeting in London last week. But actually, it's very much an open conversation. So it's sometimes about that thing, we don't know who we don't know. So actually, sometimes we, as you rightly say, Graham, there are people who this is not the area of interest at this present time. But actually, anybody who wants to have the conversation, let me just say then for Graham, and so he doesn't have to, if you want to get involved in the conversation, get in touch with us, email office@affinity.org.uk, office@affinity.org.uk if you want to have a one-to-one conversation with Graham, because he'd love to have that conversation. I can say that, Graham, because I know you would, wouldn't you?
I've had conversations with anyone who's emailed in and wanted to chat. So I've done that with lots of people. As I say, the vast majority who've engaged are actually positive about it, but that's not everybody. I've spoken to some people who said, I see what you're doing, but I don't think this is a good idea. And those are all useful chats as well. Every time you're challenged, it's really helpful. Even if some of the challenging is a little bit brutal sometimes on social media, it's all helpful because it makes you think, oh, is this a stupid idea, or am I not expressing it very well? And it helps you kind of go back to rethinking, why am I doing this? What's the gospel purpose of this? What's the answer to these objections? And some of the answers to the objections is, I don't know, and that's fair enough. I don't know yet, or I haven't worked it out yet. But all that process is healthy and helpful. So yeah, do get in contact with us. This is still an ongoing discussion. It will be an ongoing discussion within Affinity for a considerable period, I think. Lots more presenting to do and people to persuade. Lots more trying to form a model. And even if we get a kind of a model proposal together about this is how we're going to do it, you've then got to go around and persuade everybody that this is a good idea again. So there's lots more opportunities to participate. But again, getting lost in all the noise can be a danger, or lost in all the process. And to step back and say, I hope somehow in this we can encourage people in the gospel. I hope we can give people more confidence in the gospel, more confidence in clustering around a set of fairly well-defined theological principles and understandings of Scripture that we're confident in and actually joyful in being able to declare and to partner together. And that's something that I want out of this. Otherwise, it will all have been just a lot of angst for no good purpose.
Mm-hmm. Great. I think I just want to say that, let's also be praying for you and others as you make decisions. I'd encourage. I felt encouraged. That at that meeting, the conversation kept flipping back to how will this serve the gospel in the UK. And I think, as obvious as it seems, given the name of the coalition, that is the question we need to keep coming back to. And my husband, he said to me, Lizzie, the question I want you to ask is, how will this coalition help us in the kind of forgotten backwaters of South Yorkshire? How will that help us in the day-to-day ministry?
Yeah.
And I do feel that I got a pretty good answer. It may not have a direct impact straight away, but I think the intention is there that this needs to help the gospel, needs to serve the gospel, and UK churches needs to equip and empower people doing that day-to-day, grind of serving the gospel in their communities or in their particular areas of influence. So I would just say, be encouraged. We're praying for you.
Thank you very much.
So, Lizzie, can I just ask you a question? Graham, you can lean back for a second. So I just want to just ask Lizzie a question. One of the things that we're sharing with people as a result of the follow-up to the meeting that we had in London, and it was great to see you in the flesh, by the way. But one of the things that we showed was a video from Tim Savage, who's the international director of the Gospel Coalition. What did you make in terms of his take on what's going on in terms of that cultural moment? Because Graham's spoken about the fact that it is that cultural moment. It is this moment where we could have an opportunity. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I felt quite refreshed actually watching that video, because it felt very much that he came with no agenda apart from, if this will help to serve the gospel in the UK, then we are very happy to help equip you and give you some of those tools you might need. But if it is not right, then this isn't something that, we're going to push on to you. And I think he seemed, as he is actually based in the UK, he seemed to have a pretty good awareness of some of the particular issues, some of the particular conversations going on, perhaps some of those concerns about, toxicity in the US, some of the leadership failures, and perhaps some of the destabilizing issues that might come with change, but that this kind of broader coalition could actually, serve the gospel, and that the UK is going through a different cultural moment than the US is. But as with what's going on in the Anglican Church, new government as well, not that necessarily means much, because I can't see anything particularly significant changing, but there may be just something at the moment that we want to kind of hang our hook on that might be helpful for UK Christians and for UK gospel organisations. And just to, I think I felt refreshed and encouraged that the focus on being gospel centered was the absolute key. And there was no kind of top heavy hand of ownership that he wanted to kind of dominate any decisions or influence any decisions. It just felt a very kind of open-handed, if I can serve you, I'm very happy to.
Lizzie, really grateful for you saying that, because actually sometimes we are sharing the video, but actually from somebody who was in the room who heard it very much presented in that open-handed way.
Yeah, and that is definitely
probably what.
Yeah, I was going to say that definitely is his style. And I showed him, not because he was going to be very like bang, 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 here are all the reasons and here are all the answers and here's the process. He's very much not a process kind of person. He's more of a vision kind of person and, has a vision for gospel unity. He has good understanding of the UK, as you say, because he's been here for 2 stints, as it were. So he understands it well and understands the European scene. And I'm quite excited for partnership with him, because we may be able to both help and get help from European brothers and sisters in the various networks. All these things catalyze relationships, which can be, again, for gospel benefit. So I mean, we're gonna have to stop in just a sec so we get a little a nice little neat recording that people have time to listen to. But I would really encourage people, as you said already, Lizzie, to pray for me and others who are having these discussions, and to participate in as much as you can. I don't know if you've got any closing statement, Adam, you wanted to make, because I cut across.
No, I was just going to say, Graham, we're talking about further work, and I just go back to that piece again because it's further work, which says this isn't a done deal. Yep. We are continuing the conversation. This next needs to have a further conversation with Affinity Council and trustees and others who were in the room, who would have heard what was being picked up, but again, to have a kind of conversation. But Graham, just to emphasize as we come into land, you're very much around and about over the summer in terms of anybody that might be listening to this that goes, actually, I would like a conversation. I know we've said it already, but just as we come into land, just to make sure you're absolutely certain that you're happy.
I'm always super available. I do have a couple of weeks holiday, the summer holiday is the only one I protect. All the rest I'm kind of available during my holidays, but the summer holiday I do actually disconnect for 2 weeks. But other than that, I'm definitely around, and love chatting with people. I learn a lot. Every conversation helps me. So participate by all means.
Fabulous. Well, Graham, thank you so much for taking the time. Do read the statement if you've not seen the statement that was produced following last week's meeting. If you've not watched the video from Tim Savage, go and watch the video from Tim Savage. And if you feel like you need to share this podcast recording of Affinity Talks Gospel Special Edition reflecting on the UK Gospel Coalition, let me encourage you to share it across your networks, because even over the summer, this is definitely a good and well worth listen. But until next time, Lizzie, thank you so much for your time. Graham, thank you so much for your time. And we'll catch up again on another Affinity Talks Gospel podcast soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to Affinity Talks Gospel Podcast. Affinity is a network of evangelical churches and Christian organizations working together, sharing stories in order to encourage and equip God's people to preach and live the gospel in this generation. If you're interested in supporting this ministry, we'd love you to join us. Just head over to affinity.org.uk/join to find out more. And we look forward to catching up with you on the next episode of Affinity Talks Gospel